Welcome to the 100th Monkey Radio with Tom and LFE. And LFE is not here right at the moment, but he may be joining later. So here we are, looking around with all my senses at our current situation, culturally and collectively, especially here in the U.S. I find myself both excited and somewhat fearful for our future. Watching groups and peoples I have watched and interacted with over the years become polarized, contrary to the beliefs and teachings they have witnessed for, I find myself puzzled. Teaching, preaching, and promoting unity and sovereignty for years and years, and then when universe unfolds in a way they had not expected, the judgmental, divisive speech and actions, many times in a cruel and offensive way, is reactively projected as if they had completely forgotten or never even learned anything about unity and sovereignty or truly considered what unity and sovereignty are. Watching as they are under what suspiciously appears to be one of those programs we've warned each other about and discussed over and over again and again in the conscious community throughout the years. Now, I went to bed on November 8th last year, never checking the election results or how things were unfolding. You know, I haven't had a TV subscription for quite a few years now, so when I woke up the next morning, you know, my routine is to get up, I pour a cup of coffee, and while getting ready for work, I check my email. You know, I've always believed that our presidents were selected and not elected, which I think is still true to some extent, but I was really surprised that Trump had won. This brought a flood of thoughts and emotions to me. I had to re-examine my belief and look at my doubt in the corrupt system, and was it really as corrupt as I had thought? Was this hope I was feeling? Were the people's voices actually being heard? Questions, and more questions kept popping into my mind. We've known for a long time we're living in an age of great change on our planet and have been waiting for something undoubtable expressing itself to show things are really moving forward. In my own experience, it's been rare that universe delivers some wish or manifestation in a way I expect it to. Majority of the times it comes from completely unexpected directions, and then I must adapt myself to the way universe has decided to gift me. That roll with the punches sort of thing. Since the election, I've become somewhat concerned with some of my fellow travelers in the conscious community, primarily in the way they are dealing with this unexpected turn of events and their seeming disregard for the teachings and preachings so many of us have clung to over the past decades. Petty bickering, unfriending others, trash-talking those who've been friends, and forgetting what they've been taught. The ability to listen, see, and speak muted by emotional reaction. Groupthink and victimhood growing at an alarming rate. Channeled messages taking polarized positions in our political sphere. What has triggered so many of our beloved fellow human beings so far out of balance? These and many more questions we're going to put on the table tonight for discussion with our guest Hillary Raimo. Her website is hillaryraimo.com, and I am sure if any of you guys have been out there in the conscious community at all, you will know a little about this woman. She has a traditional background in psychology. She spent 20 years studying shamanic medicine with a variety of traditional and non-traditional teachers. She's a graduate of Lynn Andrews Center of Sacred Arts and Training, where she received a non-denominational minister certification through SHES. Hillary's a certified USI and Karuna Reiki master teacher trained by Sue Vazal, and currently teaches students in training in Soul Space in Albany, New York. Hillary is the founder of Love Breathe for Earth and Yin Radio TV. As a writer, Hillary shares regularly on her longtime blog, The Yin Factor, and currently co-authors the Intuitive Matrix blog with Betsy Peerless. And for more information on Hillary, I would urge you to get out there to hillaryraimo.com. She's got a phenomenal website there with just a tremendous amount of information. Hillary, welcome to the 100th Monkey Radio.
Hi, Tom. It's great to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this has been a topic that's really kind of weighing heavily on my mind here the last, since November is when it really started raising its ugly head. And what really struck me initially is, there's a couple of channelers out there that for whatever reason back in the day I signed up to their newsletters, so I get their emails in my inbox, and I started seeing polarized political opinions coming from supposed channeled sources, and this I don't know, there was just such a dirty feeling energetically I got from this when, I've had my own experiences with, divine beings, entities, higher self, whatever you want to term, however you want to term that. And it has always been extremely neutral, especially when it comes to right and wrong about opinions and other people especially. I don't know. I don't know.
It's bizarre, isn't it? It's a phenomenon that is quite telling, I think, of what you were talking about before, with this kind of shadow of the conscious community. And that's really what we're dealing with, is we're dealing with shadow stuff. And what does that mean, really? It means that we're dealing with aspects of consciousness that we don't really want to look at, or we don't really have time to look at, or we make up excuses for not to see into any deeper. It's not so much about, I get a lot of flack sometimes. People say, oh, you're trying to be a guru. Well, honey, it's not so much about being a guru as it is about inner wisdom that you start to accumulate after you've been doing spiritual practice for a long time. So we have a conscious community, a rather large one, I'd like to say. I'd like to say that there's a lot of people on this planet right now who have done the good work and have achieved certain levels of understanding, and yet here we are watching this phenomena spread like wildfire over internet communities, families, friendships, like you said, all of these different dynamics where people should be seeing more of a bigger picture kind of feel, but instead are taking it to this real harsh dynamic of critical judgment, ego, just downright gross yuck.
It's like the it's like the unveiling of their true selves. You hit it that emotion. True selves, Tom. True selves. Sorry. I don't mean to cut you off on that, but true selves really have to do with the embracing of the integration of all aspects, not just the light, pretty parts we like or other people like. Right.
We need to be able to talk about anger, and we need to be able to talk about what annoys us and what really ruffles our feathers and what really gets down into the grimy, greasy guts of who we are. Because there has become a bloom of these, let's sit on my lotus pad while I'm, got a field of shit behind me that I don't want to look at. And everybody's going, I'm meditating, but what's that smell, right?
Right.
We can't really hide this aspect of ourselves or the collective communities. And so Trump is bringing this all out for everybody. And I've written several articles on this, and I've talked about this on social media, and the response has been extremely telling about this phenomena that's happening. So I'm really glad we're taking this on tonight.
Right. It's just that when I said true selves, I guess I'm kind of referring towards more along the lines of, we all learn these things in all these different seminars we go through, these books we read, these practices that we adopt and we take on for ourselves, these exercises we do, the shadow work, and all of these different things that so many people have done to try to bring that spiritual aspect of ourselves closer to the surface so that we can be that light in the darkness. And then when something like this happens, it's really telling on how much real work they've done. And that's not really accurate either. It's whether they've I think the distinction is they learn these things intellectually, but they don't take them. They haven't. It hasn't migrated from the mind into the heart, and become part of being, part of who they are now, and that heart is expressing itself reactively, and that's what I see is people are reacting so harshly to what other people say. You know, you'll see a post on Facebook or one of those other social media sites, and people just like jump all over it with negative grime, pointing fingers, and you and I'm a victim, and I just want to pull my hair out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's quite something. It's quite an event. And what I've noticed too is when I post anything to do with Trump, and all of my posts to do with Trump are neutral, unbiased posts.
Right.
They're not, hate mongering. They're not like, oh, what a jerk, blah blah blah. It's really just a neutral fact, and it creates a cesspool of opinion and negativity. And what's interesting is I see 7 people on there who never comment on anything else, never interact anywhere else. Where are these people coming from? Do they just see this because it prompts an algorithm in their news feed? What's Facebook really doing behind the scenes? I mean, when we start to talk about this stuff, it goes a lot deeper into social manipulation, social engineering, social experiments. And when I talk about this stuff, interestingly enough, and I try to do radio shows about it, like I'm doing tonight, my computer will suddenly stop working,
right,
and my
right.
Skype goes blank, and I mean, I have a choice to get paranoid and over the top about it, but really the fact is that the people who can see through what's happening are not necessarily able to get that message out for whatever reason. So we have to kind of dissect this in an interesting way, and I hope that we get to do that tonight, because what we're really watching is the New World Order be born, but the New World Order is digital.
Right.
That's something that nobody has really talked about, because the New World Order, the Rockefellers and the Illuminati and blah, 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 okay? Well, that's great. But what they've done is they've created a digital reality that they have hooked people into, studied their social interactions, studied their emotional, reactions, studied the algorithm changes.
The flicker patterns.
Been able to, and
exactly.
Now there was an interesting bill just passed recently that nobody's talking about, because everybody's talking about Trump and his latest temper tantrum, where they talked about being able to gather your web browsing information without your consent.
Right.
Now, I thought when I saw this article, I said, people really understood the ramifications of these kinds of laws being passed very quietly under the radar without much attention, and nobody really knows it. I think people would be really upset about that, because that's a service that we pay for as customers. We pay for our internet hookups. We pay for the service, unless we go to a free place, but they're paying for it, so somebody's paying for it. Why is it that our cell phones can be monitored that way? Our smart TVs can be monitored that way. Every little thing that we do that's connected to Wi-Fi can now be tracked, hacked, collected, sold. This is what we're really talking about. This is how Trump won. I just recently wrote a book proposal for Cambridge that had to do with how digital technology make politics impossible. So when I as part of the 9 Dots Prize, and I had entered the contest, so everybody had to write a proposal on this exact topic. I found this really interesting because I had started to watch the campaigns early on, because I was hosting a internet politics show called Rockin' Politics. And every week I was talking to somebody, having to do with the political scene, and I thought that was really interesting, because it gave me kind of a nice, ripe place to ask good questions and go on and so forth. So here I am watching Trump's campaign, and he goes on to Alex Jones. And I said, this is very early in his campaign. And I said, well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And I hope people are talking about that more than anything else. And what I found that really interesting is that whatever you think about the alternative media genre now at this point, I started back in 2005, so I've seen a lot come and go. I've seen a lot of people come and go. I've seen a lot of things change and shift, and disinformation get planted through it, and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, we've accumulated millions and millions of listeners on this planet. We're a force to be reckoned with. Anybody and everybody in the alternative media business has something valuable to contribute to information, to the ability to give opinion and free thought and discussion. And what we've done is we have really become a force to be reckoned with. So Trump went to Alex Jones, who of course has on paper the most listeners, a large audience, big platform behind him, and he goes on the show and he talks to the alternative media audience. Now, what do they know after a decade or so of being involved in this kind of information? They know conspiracy.
Right.
They know anti-government. They know a lot, depending on, whatever places you're tuning into. If you listen to my show for the last 10 years, you've got a whole wide plethora of different information points, different people coming on, whistleblowers, healers, alternative information. I mean, we've really become saturated in it, and I see that as a good positive thing.
Right.
And so Trump went and talked to this audience. He talked the language. He ignited millions of listeners around the world and in this country. And then when he went and did his rallies, I watched the language he used. And when he came to Albany, New York, where I live, I went to his rally, and I climbed up to the highest, seat in the whole stadium, and I filmed it, and I listened, and I watched, and I felt. There was a whole lot of stuff going on there, and the media was very clearly manipulating and editing content so that it made it look a certain way. Now, I had the same thought as you. I thought presidents were selected, not elected. So if he's going to win, how is it that these big power structures are going to let him come in and do this? Well, I think it just came down to being Hillary and Trump. Who's the better salesperson? When you looked at her numbers attending her rallies, they were really low. The whole way they edited the footage was manipulated, so it looked like it was a packed house, but it really wasn't. Well, Trump was filling up stadiums, and people were really coming in because he was igniting that part of all of us that knows that things aren't right, whatever that is.
Right.
Something inside of us is always triggered that, something's just not right. I feel manipulated. I feel like I'm a cash cow. I feel like everything's got a commercial. I feel like everything is about me buying something. We're so disconnected from our original intentions as human beings. Now, I'll give you an example. If you look at the ancient Mayan culture or the ancient Egyptian culture, and you put that into context next to modern-day Americans in Walmart, you got a really big gap.
Just a little.
Yeah, I mean, really, seriously.
Yeah.
So you got to think that in some ingrained way, human beings are walking around going, I know there's more. I know there's more to life. I know there's more to what we're supposed to be doing here. I know there's more to my purpose, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the good qualities of the conscious community because that is part of the healing path. Those are some of the questions you start to ask yourself when you do introspective work. When you start to look within and you start to get connected to the body and how the body and the energy systems work, you start to realize that you're a whole lot more connected to your environment than you've ever really been schooled. And you start to crack open, the world of alternative media, the world of David Icke, the world of...
pulling the blinders off. Pulling the blinders off.
Well, yeah.
Yep.
So that's been the healing conscious community. So everybody's been kind of immersed in that. But what we haven't done really is taken it to the next level where we really implement these healing techniques. It's not just about paying, $100 to go to a wonderful weekend to play happy and get some, although that is all useful. I don't want to just throw that out the window and say it's not any good because it is. However, when you go back to your life and you don't live the way then you really have to question the integrity and authenticity of what's going on inside there. Now, we can't ever look at another person and judge them correctly. That's not our job. That's God's job. So
Right.
we have to stop judging people. And once we stop to judge people, then we can be a little more open, or a lot more open, to what is actually going on and how we need to navigate things. And I think that's where it becomes tricky for some people, because they haven't been really used to going into the hard stuff where, we're all one has become a real big community mantra. We're all one. Well, that's great until someone disagrees with you, clearly. Here's the screenshot of your communication on the last post you made, or, where is that compassion, that non-judgmental, that non-ego, we are one aspect? How come we're not supporting each other in our anger? Anger seems to be the number one biggest reason why we can't fully manifest a new consciousness manifesto for a changing world. I mean, let's face it, whether we like it or not, or whoever we are, everybody can look around and say the world is changing. Well, of course it's changing, but it's going to change whether you like it or not, and you can now adapt to what's happening, or you can resist it, or you can seek to change it and use some aspect of that for betterment of yourself and your community and the world. I think we're being asked really to take a look at Trump and see what does he trigger inside of us. That's a personal journey, and you have to be willing to go take it one way or the other. And whether you share that or not really doesn't matter, because you don't have to. But if you see him triggering your wounds and your man-hating stuff and your victimization, you got to go look at your stuff, not just Trump. You got to go take a look at what is still sitting there brewing that's not healed, that has to be healed, in order for me to not be triggered by anybody, let alone Trump. Well, he's so bad, he's so this, he's taking away all the regulations for the environment. I see that. It's awful. But what good is calling him names, putting him down, belittling him, and just flat out being completely disrespectful to the point where it's almost embarrassing for people?
Right.
What is that going to really do? That's the question, is what is your complaining and your berating and all that negative energy that you're generating on that, what is that really going to do? Because according to the conscious community, our thoughts are energy. They go, where they go, energy flows. I mean, come on, guys, let's put our big kid panties on and start really looking at these things and saying, hey, it's time to really wake up, because there are massive changes going on in the digital age that are going to cause us to be it's a very scary society, and I'm not trying to fearmonger with that, but we have so many laws that have been passed since 9/11 that have stripped us of our privacy, have stripped us of our ability to be independent thinking creatures without having Big Brother watch us at every single turn through our cell phones, through our TVs. When he came out and talked about being spied on by Obama, it didn't surprise me one bit. But everybody focused on, see, he's a liar.
Right.
So doesn't it kind of serve an agenda for somebody if you're not going to listen to what he says? Because I think Trump really calls it like it is.
Yeah.
And he has no problem calling big entities out. He has a thick skin, and he doesn't care if you don't like him, but he is going to care about how to maneuver through these sticky places where all of these crusty, embedded career politicians have just grown fat and sloth-like, and they just can't get out of their positions because it's politics as usual. I actually think he's here to stir the pot, stir everything up, which he's clearly doing. Whether it's for the better or for the good, I don't know. I can't see that. I'm not going to make an opinion. I'm not a supporter or a naysayer. I just think that watching this is one of the most interesting times in history because what we're watching is precedented.
Right, right. Undoubtedly. And did you know that a couple of years ago they passed the law, the propaganda law also? Back in World War II, they passed a law that made it illegal to use propaganda against United States citizens. It was okay if we went overseas and propagandized all we wanted to, but we could not do it here in the United States. That law was changed a couple of years ago, where they now can use propaganda against their own citizens. We can use propaganda; they can use it here anytime they want to, for whatever reason, on us. And you know, and that's one of those you know, that news story came out, and you heard crickets from the people out there. You know, what? I mean,
and I wondered if it was crickets because of algorithms picking up the headlines. And really, you don't get the exposure. We have become complacent on social media, where we automatically assume that what we post gets exposure.
right.
The same exposure as if you post a happy little puppy picture versus something sexually oriented versus something, you know, grotesquely arrogant and, you know, mocking versus the truth.
Well, if you think about it,
that's a really good point, because it's true.
If you think about it, it is so much easier for that manipulation to happen now because of the smartphone, because it is so limited in its scale. I mean, you've got this little tiny, you know, this tiny screen there that only so much stuff can fit on there in the first place. And you're going to be exposed to the algorithms that are attached to your account, your own specific account. And that's all that you're going to get fed unless you are actively seeking and searching. Now, when you're sitting at a different story, when you're sitting at your desktop at home, you know, you got your browser up, you have, you know, as many tabs as you want to open, and you can surf the internet, right? You can see a lot, be exposed to a lot more on a, you know, a much larger screen, obviously. But everybody now, their only interaction, they've got this phone stuck in their face 24/7. I mean, it'll and I see it and I hear it all the time. You hear these little beeps whenever somebody posts something on whatever widget they've got open at the moment, and first thing they do, they're popping their phone out, and they got their phone in there, and they're doing this while they're driving too. And that drives me crazy. But it's just the way that they brought it down to that device that is with people 24/7 now, and they're so intimately plugged in to the algorithms, if for lack of a better term, that is being fed directly for them and to them. You know, we've been talking about throughout the years the programming, you know, big quotation marks around that word, that has been going on in our society has become so prevalent in especially the major media, is where I see it more prominent than even on the internet. There's quite a bit of programming on the internet, but if you're plugged into any of the major media networks, the programming that goes on there is just incredible. There's tons and tons of research and documentaries and books and just tons of material out there on neuro-linguistic programming, and, you know, just a huge plethora of different types of programming that are being fed down our throats, and it is a real science. I mean, that whole Manchurian Candidate thing pops into my mind. You know, that they can program people to do what they want. So, in light of that, you know, we have to ask the question of ourselves. If we can pull ourselves out of the program long enough, ask that question of ourselves: am I programmed? Am I programmed?
Well, I'm programmed to some degree, yeah. I mean, everybody's got some program running. I mean, I see a lot of people turn and say, oh, you're just mind controlled, or, you know, they dismiss them, and then they go and they blab it on some platform somewhere in the wagon and goes, oh, yeah, you know, I know, you know, he or she, they've been programmed, they're all mind controlled. It's just, that's where the alternative media had a disservice.
Right.
They have kind of given people this inkling, and, you know, this look into these very real programs, these very real realities. But it's kind of like calling someone a narcissist. It's like, unless you're a professional psychologist and you've sat face to face and you've done some time, it's unethical to label someone with a psychological disease unless you're qualified to do that. And
right.
I see people throw around the word narcissist like it's candy. You know, oh yeah. But it reminds us So we have to be careful with the labels. We have to be careful with the mudslinging. We have to be careful with all that, because that's a really easy way to discredit somebody who might be doing a really legitimate service to people by bringing real information out. The best thing to shut someone down is to make people distrust them or think that they're something that they're not. And I've seen very real whistleblowers go through that, in fact, where they really do have good quality information for the general public to really help them see into whatever it is. And, you get a bunch of hecklers or people who have some kind of personal grudge or, whatever their agenda is. All they have to do is come in and just implant a couple little things here and there,
right,
and it turns an audience away.
Right.
So how do we deal with that aspect too? Well, you gotta fine tune your bullshit meters, okay? You gotta kind of refine down into all that. Sorry if that's offensive to people, me swearing, but it just comes out.
Yeah.
But the New Age community would tell me I'm not spiritually aligned with the highest purpose because
right.
I use the bad word. Anyway, try to find humor in all this because it's a really heavy topic. And people don't like to talk about it. And when I start talking about this, whether it's a radio show or an article or on social media, it's usually crickets for a while because people are either afraid to read it and they have their own feelings about it, but they're afraid to comment.
That's a big sign right there. That's a huge significator right there. If people, and that's part of the point I was trying to get to here on those comments was that how do we get people to stop and ask those questions of themselves before they explode or implode? Because is it possible to smack somebody upside the head with a 2x4 before they get a building dropped on top of them? I want to be so proactive with this stuff, and I know that you just can't grab somebody and shake them awake. I know you can't do that. But there's triggers out there that get people to react negatively to, especially we see it very, very prominently out there in the cyber world right now. Anything associated with Trump are huge triggers, but there's got to be another trigger on the other side. And I'm not expecting a direct answer out of this, but there's got to be one out there that gets people to ask the question of themselves. And that's where everything has to start, right? We have to start inside ourselves to heal these things. And when I see my fellow beings out there, traveling on this planet and being self-destructive, I want to grab them, or I want to find that trigger that gets them to stop in their tracks and look at themselves and ask themselves some good questions.
Yeah, well, if you're in the presence of somebody, well, that's happening. I have always found that questions are great tools. Asking questions, and it's not an interrogation, but it's a way of prompting self-reflection in certain areas that perhaps they hadn't noticed before. And when somebody is asked a question, it begins a whole process in the brain that is less debatable or defensive, and it has to be more reflective. What we're dealing with, I believe, after observing the things I've observed for this whole time that this has been happening between Hillary and Trump becoming president, is that it's really a private, personal matter for each person. You have to really figure out for yourself what's going on inside of you to make you so reactive. And then what is your relationship with anger? What is your relationship with other people who get angry? Most people who have these reactive anger issues can't handle other people's anger very well. It's an anger healing. And, I've seen people who preach how to heal anger get angry and do the same thing that they're trying to help their clients or their people get through, or, just in general. And so we're dealing with kind of an anger trigger that Trump brings out in all of us. But if you look at the social environment, it's been rather interesting all this time. Black Lives Matter has popped up. Terrorism seems to be kind of an agenda that it's losing a little bit of focus, if you ask me, because when Bush was in power and Obama was in power, we had a kind of more of a distinct agenda when it came to this. What I think Trump is doing is really going into the fact that he knows that he won the election through his social media reach. He knows he won the election through his alternative reach. He knows that he took on mainstream media and called them out for all their paid, bought-off, biased opinions and reporting. We see that the news is unreliable, that we can't really trust it. We see platforms like Facebook coming out and saying, well, we're going to let you know if something's fake news.
Right.
And so, but when you have that kind of hunt down for information, you have to wonder, is this really the agenda all along? Is this about shutting down alternative media? Is this about coming after free thought, free speaking sites run by the average Joe person with maybe, a handful of listeners or an audience, about shutting them down so that that free speech can't get out and infect the social environment? What kind of control are we really talking about when it comes down to this stuff? It's pretty scary. You mentioned the propaganda law, and actually that was passed, I believe, in 2016 under Obama. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that that's correct.
If it was 2016, it was early 2016. I know it's been a good year now.
Yeah, well, I'm actually looking online, and I'm getting kind of an echo. I hope that's not coming back in the recording. But it said here that he signed into law the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2017. So he actually signed this change in this act, this change that, because the propaganda part of it was a very small piece inside of a much larger bill. And unless people are really reading these things, they have no idea what's really being passed. We've lost touch, and I see one of the positives coming out of this Trump era is that people are now finding out how to reach out to government, how to stand up at their local town meetings, how to use their voice to express themselves. I don't know how much good it really does on social media except to stir a more aggressive type social environment, but our digital lives matter, and what we put out there digitally is a fingerprint. It shows into your digital psychology, your just like your web browsing does. And what I see kind of as a bigger picture is a move in a direction that's rather alarming to me. And so how do you bring this up and talk about it in an environment that's already hostile for its own reasons? Can you have a conversation about this without getting pulled into a debate on what a jerk this person is or not? And I don't see that happening. I don't see the conversations taking place about, well, what do you mean it's legal now for our own government to use propaganda against us? Who passed that? When he talked about the microwave being part of what was spying on him during the campaign, he went kind of hush-hush on that, and so did Kellyanne Conway. And you have to wonder, well, is this such top-secret information that if he did come out and reveal it, it would be, devastating to the public? Would the public even care? Would they notice? Would they just, it's like Snowden came along and did his thing. WikiLeaks comes along and exposes that the technology is there. With an hour's worth of, armchair research online, you can find it for yourself. This is not something that hasn't been put out. This has been something that's been talked about for actually years. So the technology is just now being admitted that it's working. So every person who's listening, you have a smartphone or a smart TV, you actually have the potential to be spied on by your government who has gained these unbelievable reaches into your personal life thanks to 9/11. Yeah. And we all know 9/11 story is a questionable, who did it type conspiracy. But the fact is, the minute those buildings went down, laws went into effect that started to create a digital new world order.
Yeah. Well, actually, right now we're doing this show over Skype, and 100% of Skype is scooped up digitally and recorded. 100%. 100%. Now this is from what I understand. All digital phone calls, 100% are scooped up. And it's just a matter of them unpacking it on whether or not they're
finding stronger and stronger ways to unpack that data.
Right.
If you look at CERN and how CERN has gone through this unbelievable power up over the last couple years, And they originally came out announcing that they were actively looking for dimensional openings, portals for other dimensions. You don't hear anything about that anymore. But what a lot of people don't realize is that, why does that matter? Because CERN is the birthplace of, so it's the center of the spider web. So when you have a power-up change, or you have some big money going into a facility that really holds for the World Wide Web, you got to wonder what else is going on there. I mean, my curious cat inside me goes, what's going on over here? And I just can't leave it alone. And I probably won't. I'll probably look and kind of read up on it, because it's fascinating to me where we're headed. And Trump, if he was selected for this role, he's a brilliant salesperson in the sense that he's got a proven track record. I mean, I don't really care what anybody thinks about his businesses or how many times he's declared bankruptcy, because anybody who's ever been in the corporate world knows bankruptcy is just a standard thing you do when you go through the transformational phase. I have a background in real estate and insurance. I have both my license in New York State. So I have an understanding of control edge and how some of these things work. I'm not just a spiritual person on a mission to talk about these things. And when I saw back in 2000, there was a shift in the insurance industry that started to talk. Now, this was just a tiny little shift in the contractual language, because we're being prepped for these kinds of changes in technology years before they were acting out mainstream market and being really popular. You know, they always introduce a product as, oh, this is, up on a pedestal, and if you're good enough and you make enough money, you can afford one, and blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, they launched the product out full scale, prices are lowered, everybody can have one, everybody's happy. It's a marketing technique. We have been nothing but consumers who have been marketed products and technology that I believe are reverse engineered. And if you want to get into the real deep rabbit hole, if you want to talk about an alien civilization here and taking over the earth, they would do it this way.
Right.
They would hook everybody up to a signal and be able to tune in to any single person they ever wanted to for whatever reason. We have no idea what these people are really doing, these people being the ones in those industries. It used to be certain technicians and certain jobs and certain skill sets were valuable. Well, I think one of the most valuable skill sets now is being a coder. Because if you can code, if you're a master coder, you can get into anything in the digital world. And what they released in the WikiLeaks release recently was the fact that not only are you being spied on and listened to through smart technology, but this information is being gathered, it's being used to sell to you, it's being used for this and that, but that the CIA actually lost control of that technology to hackers. So that makes me wonder, what is the real war going on? I don't think it's about Russia and the United States. I don't think it's about space beings and humans. I think it's about hackers who have now come into the ability to break into government systems. The deep web is a perfect example of that, and the Bitcoin process. And we can get into that if you want, because I've actually been watching that too. And the whole thing just reeks of a reality that's brewing under everybody's surface that nobody knows about, because they're so distracted with this other garbage going on about who to hate, who to blame, who to be mad at, who to turn your back on and ignore and make it about a social statement.
Yep.
We're being farmed into social people.
Right. It really is curious what is going on beyond the surface right now that's being put in our face. Which is the big Trump traumas that are going on. What else is going on in the world right now that nobody is looking at? I don't know a whole lot about the you called it the deep web. Okay, I haven't looked at that at all. So if you want to touch on that a little bit, I would be interested in learning something.
Good, it's great. I was first introduced to the deep web in 2015. I knew nothing about it until somebody brought it to my attention. And the person who actually brought it to my attention was Robert Duvall, who most people know who are listening to these kind of radio stations as the creator of the Orion theory, and he discovered that the pyramids were aligned to the Orion constellation. and he's written many books. And one of his best books that he's written, called The Master Game, actually goes into some of this stuff and talks about how culture and society has been really manipulated by these powerful influencing type groups and social structures. So when he talked to me about this, I said, well, that's really strange. So immediately I started looking and researching, and what I realized quickly, and anybody can do this if they have a computer and a search engine, was that the deep web, what we really don't know anything about, because the internet, the complete internet that people pay for, they sign up, they get service, they hook up all their devices to, is only 4% of information. I found that fact mind-blowing.
Wow.
In fact, it was an epiphany. So when you get on your search engines, Google, even if you use the ones that are non-traceable, you are only getting access to 4% of actual information. The rest of it lies in the deep web. And it's a really scary place if you don't know what you're doing, you don't know how to get into it, and it's because you have a lot of gross activity in there. You have a lot of perverted sexual stuff in there. So when people go into the deep web, that's usually the first parts that they see. They're like the porn, this, that, and they're like, oh, why would anybody go in here? This is only for sick perverts, right? But what they don't realize is the deep web is layered. So once you get past that stuff, you get into some of the dark video games, the games that are, really more about like just some real sick stuff. Then you get into the next layer, and you have where governments store their information. And then under that layer, you have, in the same layer, you have the government stored information, you have the academic stored information, you have where colleges store their information, universities, big institutions. It's where most of that information is stored. And when you get underneath that, you have top classified information, black markets. The Silk Road is a perfect example of that. Anybody, just Google Silk Road, and you'll go right to a case where there was a common marketplace built in the deep web that had to do with drugs, and you could go in there and you could get whatever you wanted. And the thing that was really interesting about the Silk Road case was that the person who ran it was using, fake name, and it was anonymous, and he was very hard to track, and it's still kind of iffy. However, what he had done was he had created a new drug market. The new drug market took out the middleman and put consumers in direct relation to the product. They actually proved that crime had decreased because of this black marketplace.
Wow.
And because people were no longer having to go to certain areas of their cities to get it, crime, there was less turf war, there was less all of this, because all of a sudden you could just go online, click, and get whatever you wanted. But what was even more interesting that they had done was they created it with Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is a digital currency that I'm predicting will come out onto a grand scale. If not Bitcoin itself, there will be something else that will be a digital currency. We are going to go from a paper currency to a digital currency at some point, perhaps in our lifetime, definitely our kids. So what happened was the authorities broke into the server, into this marketplace, and they will not disclose how they broke into it. And the fact that they were able to break into that black marketplace is telling of the technology that's available, okay? And they stole the Bitcoins out of that common marketplace.
Wow.
They took all the Bitcoins out, and then all of a sudden you had 5 or 6 different very similar black marketplaces pop up. So what they did was they took they took what he had created, stole it from him, and there is somebody who's doing time for the actual creation of that, and there's a lot of question about whether he's the actual person who created it or not. He's the scapegoat. They took, and we're talking millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin money, and the authorities stole it. They didn't even have to report it. It's not even a bleep on your computer screens. You're not going to see it on CNN. You're not going to hear it. You might hear it at a couple of different specialty sites that were talking about it related to the case. But then when you have the creation of 4, 5, 6 more similar marketplaces, what they did was they basically created a little mecca of competition to make money for themselves. So we have a lot of corruption going on in these kinds of deep web type places because there's no regulation. People don't even understand it. They don't even know it exists. They have no idea how it works. They don't know how to get into it, and most of them can't even make it past the layers of the porn and the gross video game stuff. And once you get into the academic storehouses of information, you're automatically on the FBI's radar.
Right.
And you start getting harassed, sometimes digitally, for that. And the fact that the harassment abilities of these different agencies, people, hackers, there is absolutely no way to stop it. There's no way to stop it. If you have someone target your computer systems, your smart homes, your smart cars, your smartphones, you can't prove that it's government, and you can't prove that it's not government. So if you get some wacko that's in that level of ability and skill set to be able to go into your stuff, turn your microphones on in your computer, turn your microphones on in your phone, turn your microphones on in all your smart TVs in your house, it creates a breeding ground for misuse, abuse, and corruption. And this is what people really, really should be paying attention to, instead of, what Trump's hair looks like, or how much you hate, Jody now because she doesn't agree with your opinion on Trump, and screw her, and we're not friends anymore, and even though we've been friends for 20 years, it's insane. But when you start talking about this kind of information, this real information, this stuff that is verified true fact, because you can take everything I'm saying and go look it all up for yourself online, and you can find your way to the information. Once you start realizing what you're really dealing with, it's natural to get a little paranoid about it, because you just don't really know what to do with that, because your whole life has been molded around your digital connections now. Think about it.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. On some level, it's absolutely brilliant what's been engineered and how it's being used, and I think Trump understands it completely, and I think that's how he won his campaign, and it threw all the experts out for a loop, because they don't realize how awake people really are, and that, the same old bashing on CNN or NBC or one of the news sites doesn't have the same effect, because people have woken up.
Right. Well, the Silk Road, after you started explaining all this, I realized that I've actually been there, probably 5 or 6 years ago now. I had to create a kind of a anonymous server on my own computer, and I can't remember the programs that I used, but there were several different secrecy programs, for lack of a better term, that I had to install to be able to create an anonymous server to be able to plug into. I actually went through to Silk Road one time. There was another site, and for the life of me, I can't remember what it was called. But along the same lines, the illicit drugs, the illegal stuff here in the U.S. That I went to, and I checked some of this stuff. I've never bought anything from there, but I was just a little paranoid at the time that I wouldn't get what I paid for, or I'd end up the dogs would sniff me out or whatever. But I've actually been down in those trenches, so I know it's there. I can definitely verify that part of it for you for sure. It's an interesting thought. I know that it's a lot deeper than what we see, but 4%, wow, that is a startling percentage when you think about how much is out there on the surface that we do have access to easily.
Well,
That's
they model
a ton
it
of information.
after they model it after the human. I mean, if you look at what we use as everyday humans at this point in time, we don't use the full capacity of our brain.
Right.
We only use, maybe 7-8%, most of us.
Right.
And so they model it in a way, I believe, that can be compared to the human brain. There's all this other stuff brewing under there that you just don't really access unless, it's the subconscious.
Well, that really makes sense, though, right? As above, so below.
Sure,
Yeah.
it's a spiritual teaching. So I mean, if you've spent any time in spiritual work or spiritual teaching, you can apply that work to what's happening on the collective, because it's a mirror of the microscopic. The macroscopic is a mirror of the microscopic, and so you can actually figure out what energy is at work simply by observing your closer life, your microcosm, those people that you're in relationship with, the people that you have an actual physical relationship with, you see every day, your work associates, your family, your partners. You can self-analyze these things that are going on, self-observe, and then you can relate or compare them to larger, bigger picture issues. It also works the other way around. So if you look at the collective, this is kind of how I give readings on the collective energies. It's kind of how I see, it's how I go into these energies. Because once you start to be able to connect these things, it's like a muscle. The more you do it, the better you get
Right.
at it, and the less you do it, the less you're able to do it. So it's kind of like a psychic muscle.
Right.
If you're able to really work it and to see these patterns and to see the agendas going on, it's a gift. I used to think everybody can do it, and I really don't think that's the case. And once you can do it, you really just can't shut it off. So it's kind of like opening up your psychic abilities or your intuition and cleaning it all out so it has a healthy functioning. Once you have that healthy functioning, you can't shut it off.
Right.
And a
Right.
lot of people don't really want to work with their intuition or synchronicity because it's weird and it creates turbulence in your life, or it might ask you to change some things, might ask you to go in a direction you're really maybe honestly afraid to go into, or for whatever reason. And so we're talking about personal change again. We're talking about personal accountability and responsibility and healing paths, and that's how I see the healing part of this tied into all of it. Because it's a tool to be able to use to read energy in your personal lives and your collective lives. And if you can do it without getting pulled back into the wounds or back into the triggers, and you have a better ability to be able to kind of take it apart, look at it, and say, oh, there it is. Oh, this and that. That's what's triggering me. And as soon as you observe it, it starts to be healed, because that's basic physics. It's called spooky action at a distance.
Right.
Like once you see something, it changes it all the way back to the beginning. That's an actual thing.
Right.
And it's a really beautiful concept, because I think what we're dealing with is, we as human technology have the ability to connect to other people in such profound ways that connection has been stunted, if not downright tried to be stopped, so that we're just consumers.
Right.
We just have to focus. They just want us to buy everything. Just want materialistic things.
Right.
I mean, that's pretty. I mean, you could admit, you can see that, right? I mean, it's been pretty obvious for a few decades now, is that we've just been seen as the American buyers. We have money. We go to other countries. They want us to buy. China depends on our orders here to fill up Walmart. And people are starting to not do it as much.
Right.
I don't know if that's actually true, but it feels that way.
We're starting to realize.
Yeah,
we're starting to realize what it's done to our own culture, our own society. I mean, at least at my perspective, what I'm seeing is part of this uproar we're seeing right now here in the U.S. is we're realizing that, we're hoping that it's not too late, but we're realizing that we've given away so much and we've pushed away so much of what is really valuable in our lives. Having something to be proud of at the end of the day, to show your contribution to the world instead of take. What are we giving? We're asking those questions. What are we contributing? And when we look out and all we see is that we are nothing but pure and simple consumers, 95% consumer, and we're only giving 5%, then we're realizing that there's an imbalance here in our culture. And I think part of this, whether or not it's conscious in most people, I think something deep inside of them is telling them, hey, there's something wrong here, and we need to right this ship, or we're going to sink. I don't know. I go both directions, and looking at where we're going right now as a society. Some parts of it, I think, oh my God, we're doomed, and on other parts, I'm very, very hopeful for our future, because I know that out of this turmoil, that something better is going to arise. But I just hope it doesn't hurt so bad,
Well, I mean, it's a good question.
Yeah.
And, we talked about a lot in this show. And some people are just waking up to that for the first time. That needs to be gentle and kind. Some people have known about this for a long time and are very schooled, or they think they have all the information in the right places and they can talk about it all. I mean, people ask me, well, how do you know all this? Well, it's because I've done a radio show for over a decade, and I've talked to a person of my choice once a week for that entire time, and most of those topics were associated with these kinds of things,
right,
as well as other topics. So I've had the conversations with people. I talked to the head counsel of the ACLU last year in one of my Rocking Politics show, and he disclosed on the podcast that the LED lighting system has the potential to be spy technology. And I thought, what a
really?
That is. Right, so you haven't even heard of that, right? So
no.
The LED light system, they have the spy technology in the public LED light system. So your malls, your public squares, they don't reveal this because they don't want people to know. They think you think just because you see a camera up there, that's the only angle. But what's really happening is they can see you in all the lighting. And if they want to put that kind of technology into a home, they will put that technology into a home, and your light bulbs will be spying on you. And I thought to myself, well, if this wasn't coming from the head counsel of the ACLU, I wouldn't believe it, honestly. I'd be like, well, maybe that's kind of pushing it. And, I'd have to spend some time really researching that. But because it was coming from him, I did believe it. So I did research it after the show, and I said, wow, this is really true. And LED lighting has been sold to consumers as an energy-efficient product to make your planet better, your home bill cheaper, etc., etc. So we've been hoodwinked in a lot of ways with technology. They have created ways to put an eye, which is the Illuminati sign, into everything. And that has been the goal for very long periods of time leading up to this. And terrorism is an agenda that helps sell it. So Trump is really a better salesperson than Hillary Clinton, because Hillary Clinton had that, frumpy grandma look, and she was just kind of going with this old, outdated kind of image, and people just really didn't want that anymore. They wanted somebody who was a little more fresh, I think, and so Trump offered that, and that's why he won. And I don't really believe any of the digital stuff that they talk about, or, how they question all the election stuff, and they bring the Russians in it. Why is it bad to hate somebody who's Russian? That's what I'd like to know. It's just another programming. It's another propaganda. It's another neuro-linguistic programming plug.
Right.
We really are susceptible to that, and there are people who know how to do NLP like masters,
right,
and they can make people do whatever they want. I've seen it.
Yeah.
And unless you're really, really centered and grounded in your own space, where you can't be manipulated by another person, which I would consider a spiritual mastery of being able to hold your center and not fall into the spell of people like that, you're not the majority.
Yeah.
The majority of people don't know how to hold their center, clearly. We're seeing that emotionally explode everywhere. And until you know how to really hold your center, you are going to be pushed off that center with whatever triggers you. And NLP people, especially the master practitioners, are like wizards with that stuff.
Right.
I've seen people who I never would have thought would have gone off into something, but did because they were planted with this NLP stuff.
Right.
It's very real.
Right.
It's scary too.
Yeah. I did quite a bit of research into that a few years back. Brain fart. Oh, here we go. as far as the centering yourself and finding these masteries of different levels of our own growth and our own consciousness, now I've noticed that there's certain plateaus that I've hit where I'll hit a space with whatever concept I'm dealing with at the time, whichever truth I'm dealing with at the time, where it goes past the intellectual and the feeling part and goes into a zone I call the knowing zone. The knowing zone for me is where it becomes part of being, where it just becomes part of who and what I am in every way, shape, and form. That truth, whatever that truth was that I've been researching, learning, developing, et cetera, whatever that topic happens to be, I'll hit a certain plateau where it transforms into a state of being within myself. That's when I have that unshakable center on those concepts, on that thought process, on that knowing, but the process getting there is that can be a very traumatic experience. I have to leave my safety zone, my comfort zone, to consider new concepts, to consider new thought process, consider new way of being. And a lot of times, we talked about it earlier, we lose friends. We have to change environment. We have to change the way we do things. We have to change what we eat, whatever it happens to be. We have to go through a change process, or we do go through, it's not a have to, we do go through a process of change for ourselves, and sometimes it can be very uncomfortable in the world and society that we live in. And I think that is one of the biggest, at least from my experience, what I've seen out there, one of the biggest deterrents people come against for gaining new insights, gaining new truths for themselves, reaching those center points in a solid stand, being able to have both feet on the ground in that new truth. Getting there can be very traumatic, and it's a daunting process when you look at it and you start the process, and then it becomes traumatic or dramatic or one of those ticks, and you push it off to the side. Well, I'll deal with that later, or maybe I'll let myself get sidetracked into something else, and then we'll put that on the side. I know that intellectually now, so I'll say I know that.
Or it's another. I've dealt with that. I don't deal with that energy more, and I see it in you. So therefore, I'm going to block you and run away from you and not have anything to do with you.
Right.
I like to call it the avoidance syndrome. It's like, well, it's just going to manifest.
Avoidance syndrome. I like that.
I mean, if you got to turn around and face whatever's coming at you, whoever's coming at you, in whatever way you can, and get a thicker skin and stronger boundaries, and stop being afraid of those kinds of uncomfortable feelings. And there's way too much spiritual arrogance going on in the conscious community, where they think that, somebody's having a bad day, or they're crying, or they're being upset. Well, they're not as ascended, and they're not as spiritually, adept as I am, or so-and-so, or whatever, and we have a tendency to turn our backs on people like that, and a very wrongly judged circumstance. I think we have to learn to be empathetic. We have to learn how to be compassionate. We have to learn how to be better citizens for each other, so that we're more of a support system instead of a cliquey high school-like cliche where we all kind of go off our own little groups and we only stay there until we're comfortable, until we're not comfortable, I should say.
Right.
So it's kind of like, I don't know. I see this all as coming full circle in the conscious community, because now that we have spent so many years opening up and learning what triggers us and healing our stuff and going through it, well, I mean, are we just going to be students forever? Are we just going to always be learning and healing? I mean, when do we get to the healed point?
Right.
And when do we come back as well-integrated, adults, and work in that and deal with each other in that and thrive? Because I think this is not a doomsday message. This is not like, oh, they're all going to... The reason they're coming down on us so hard with control stuff is because they're losing control. They're losing control of consciousness within the human being because we're naturally evolving according to the earth cycles, according to the sun cycles, according to the environment that they can't stop. And we're becoming more telepathic. We're becoming more synchronistic. We're learning how to trust the signs and come into contact with other people and build a kind of twine that creates a bigger, better consciousness when you have more people do it. I think one of the reasons, we haven't talked about this, but I think one of the reasons why cannabis is having such a hard time becoming legal is because they can control the grow process, they can control the money part, but what they can't control with power plants, and I believe cannabis is one, is the opening of consciousness.
Right.
Anyone who's taken ayahuasca, anybody who's done any of those kinds of, consciousness-altering type power plants knows that that is exactly what happens. It's a reset button, and it takes all the programming out, and it just resets the brain biochemically, and you have the ability to kind of free your mind in a way. Most people use cannabis as a way to, socially interact, and it's kind of got a bad reputation. But when you use it to meditate, or when you use it for contemplation or higher level conversation, it has a different effect on the brain.
Oh boy!
And somebody just wrote a great book, Spirituality and Cannabis. I don't have it in front of me. I got it from one of the publishers. It just recently came out. And it's really a great book, and I highly recommend it for everybody who wants to know more about that, because cannabis was found in the Voynich manuscript, which is a very old, untranslated manuscript that is held at the Rare Manuscript Library at Yale University. And I had the privilege of being able to go see it a few years ago. And one of the only identifiable plants in that book was the cannabis plant.
Right.
And I think what we're dealing with is a whole other paradigm of human evolution that the people in power want to control. They know it's coming, they know it's here, and certain people are attaining that, and it's very hard to contain that kind of freedom of mind. So I see a positive outcome in the fact that we're just going to keep growing out of the programming. We're going to keep waking up and realizing what's real and what matters. We're going to stop being mindless Walmart shoppers. And we're going to start paying better attention to our intuition, our feelings, our synchronicity. We're going to be less led by, the sheep herder and more led by our own truth-centered pieces. That's my hope, and that gives me hope because I see it in my own life, and I see it in the lives of those close to me, and I see it in the lives of my clients and the people that I work with. So I know it's happening.
Right.
And maybe my ego wants the timing to be now, hurry up and get
Yeah, exactly where I'm at.
Yep.
Yeah, my compassion for others is probably my biggest stumbling block, because I look out at the world today, and doing what we do with the radio shows, we're interacting with people all over the world all the time. And when I look out in the world and I see my brothers and sisters out there that are I see them way off balance. I see them self-destructing. I see them doing things that I know, and this is coming from a non-judgmental place. This is coming from experience, that I've experienced things and I've seen things. I've watched others experience, and I know the road that they're on and where they're going, and the brick wall that they're running into, and my compassion. It just squeezes my heart when I'm watching my brothers and sisters running 50 miles an hour into a brick wall, and I want to reach out and grab them. And I talked about grabbing them and shaking them earlier. That's my own big stumbling block. And the thing that the frustration factor that grows within me is from watching my friends and my fellow and my brothers and sisters self-destructing. And I'm knowing the times that we're in right now and the changes that are happening on the planet right now. I know that this is universe is dictated. Okay, this is the best way for us to snap out of this, for us to to get to where we want to go as a culture, as a society, as a collective. I know that this is the path. I have no doubt about that. I've seen too much evidence to support that. So when I look out there and see that, I think about all the different teachers and spiritualists and gurus, or everybody out there, the psychics out there that have talked about the separation of our society, the polarization of people, and how the people are going to choose the dark path or the light path. I see something more that's closer to the middle, but what I'm afraid is that we're going to end up, so many people are going to end up falling by the wayside, and they're not going to make it through this stuff. They're not going to be able to deal with the new realities that are unfolding for us. And I'm not naive enough to think that this is all going to be happening in a twinkling of the eye. But when we look at it in 500 years, it'll seem like it was a twinkling of the eye. The shifts that we're going through in our times right now. I guess the thing I'm trying to point out here is that there's so many of us that want to be proactive in helping the rest of our fellow mankind, and whether we're coming or this is being projected from a stable, solid, nice standpoint of good solid center or not. There's a lot of compassion out there that's being projected, and they want to be proactive. And how in the hell do we do it without doing more damage? You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. Well, you can't help anybody until you help yourself first.
Right.
And that's a concept that a lot of people need to understand, because we all think that we have to be selfless and go out there and just be about everybody else. But if you can't pay your bills, or you're living paycheck to paycheck, or you have, your circumstances are limited, how about changing that so you can be more of service? You can't do for anybody else what you can't first do for yourself.
Right.
So if you want to go out there and help the whole world and help them all and great, but you can't help yourself, then you're not going to be any good for anything. It's just you're going to stumble and stumble and stumble, and you're going to constantly creep up on that wall, because that wall isn't going to come down until you can do it for yourself first. So once you learn how to do that for yourself, then you learn how to do it for your family. And anybody in the spiritual path knows that your family is the most difficult mirrors that you face in your healing process, because they're oftentimes the most challenging. And, once you can work through that part of it, then the community becomes an issue. Then you move out into the world that way. I'm not saying that everybody's going to have a perfect personal life. That's ridiculous. But and that we need to really just stop looking at other people to be these ideal images of perfection, when perfection is kind of a lie. You're already perfect. You just have to, what are you here for? What's your purpose? Find your purpose. Find what you're here to do. What's your gift? Not everybody has the same gifts. Some people have similar gifts. Some people have, the same genre of gifts, but not everybody has the same exact life experience. I have always found that what I pull on for my reflections or talks like this is my experience. And my experience is very unique and different, and just like the next person's experience is going to be unique and different. And so until we learn to really respect individuals for individuals, we've been brainwashed that we're all one. Well, we're not. We are not all one. Not all of us have the same life experience. Not all of us have come to the same conclusions and had the same lessons. If we're all one, we're living the same exact carbon copy lives of each other, and that's not true. We're all one when it comes to being in a human body. We're all one when it comes to certain aspects of the human experience. But we are not all one when it comes to our unique, individualized fingerprint of a lifetime. Now, that said, so wouldn't it make sense in the grand cosmic scheme of things that each person having this unique vibration, this unique thumbprint of a human experience, that they're priming themselves for their purpose at all times? And when they come to that purpose, place where they realize this is exactly what I'm here to do, this is what I'm supposed to do, then everything starts to click. And everything starts to go right in this flowy, it's supposed to happen like this kind of feel. And when you find yourself aligned in that energy, you know you're on the right track. And just stay with it and just keep letting it happen. And if you come up to a closed door, just trust that. Trust that the closed door is a reason to just go in this other direction. Don't question it. Don't psychoanalyze it. Don't hate it. Don't get mad at it. Just go, okay, let it flow over you like water, which is another spiritual teaching. I think what we're really seeing is, Tom, we're seeing the manifestation of these ancient old spiritual teachings coming out and really, oh, that's why I learned that. So we've been collecting these tools over our course of our lifetime. We've been collecting experiences. We've been collecting all of these different perspectives for a reason. Now, wouldn't it be phenomenal if that reason had to do with your higher purpose? And there's no mistake. I mean, look at this grand universe. I mean, of all the times and places to be incarnate, you're here now? That is an amazing concept. What are you doing wasting it? Getting mad and feeling sorry for yourself and being depressed and angry over stuff. Being angry is good. I think people need to get angry. People need to be angry about the situations that they're waking up to find themselves in. It's kind of like having your consciousness cracked open. I can relate that to when I first found David Icke's work. I refer back to his work for a couple reasons. I don't agree with everything that he's written. I'm going to say that right off the bat. However, what I do agree, I've read every single one of his books because one of my spiritual teachers at the time, we're talking about a decade ago, when he was very unfamous, and he had maybe 10 people, 20 people showing up at his lectures. Now he sells out places, and he's very untouchable. But when he, way back in the beginning, I knew there was some truth going on in this information. And the way he was tying things together and doing a little bit of predictive work in some of his material, very hard material to get through. The only reason I think I survived it was because I knew the person who had told me to read every single one of his books. Why would she tell me to do that if there wasn't something for me to find? So I did. Then I started to read his source books and find his source information, the books that he was referring to. And I started to read all those. And I went through a few years of this psyche opening breakdown of reality. And that is really hard. It was really hard because not everybody is going through that breakdown of reality. And when you start talking about it, you sound crazy to a lot of people, and a lot of people reject that immediately until they have their own experience. So I kind of relate it to that. It's like we're all going through a breakdown of psyche right now. We're all going through a breakdown of reality in one form or another. And those of us who've already done it, well, congratulations, pat yourself on the back. You're a few steps ahead of your fellow humanity. And now it's your job to be a leader in that. It's your job to help other people cross the bridge. It's your job to sit there and to help people navigate through this harder information that breaks down their little happy unicorn world and turns it all upside down and makes them say, well, wait a minute. Well, I was sitting here doing my mantra, and my cell phone was recording everything I was saying to my husband or whoever you're talking to. And, what do they do with that information? Well, nothing necessarily. They just store it. And how come these terrorism events don't ever happen at the NSA's data collection centers out in Utah? They happen in cafes. They happen in nightclubs. They happen in all these little venues that are, what is your purpose of going into these little venues and blowing things up, okay, when the real threat is over there? Collecting every single one of pieces of information that you have visually to just use in its own moment. These quantum computers are coming out. All of these things are being put into place to do what? Right. This is what we should all be gathering and talking about. This is where we should be putting our focus and attention. Not because it's negative or dark. No, because it's a reality. It's truthful. It's what's happening. Here's the proof. How come it's crickets when we talk about this? Because that has nothing to do with hating another person.
Right. It's so true. And it can be well, you sound like you went down the David Icke rabbit hole. And I've jumped down quite a few rabbit holes myself. But it is, every time I have, there's been that driving energy behind it. It's something just bubbling up from inside me that tells me that there's something there for me. There's something there for me. And I have always come out of whichever hole I jumped into, richer and greater than I was when I jumped in. So, I like to get people to ask questions. That's one of the best things, the most rewarding things that I've found in my life is when I can have a conversation with somebody or an interaction of any way, shape, or form, the radio show, the internet, the whatever, in person, and I get somebody to ask a question of themselves. That has always been the most rewarding thing the thing that's just made me glow inside is getting others to ask questions. And I do this on Facebook periodically. I'm not a very active person on Facebook. I get on there, maybe 2 or 3 hours a week. I'm on Facebook, and I asked a question a couple of weeks ago that was pretty revealing. And I got maybe 30 or 40 people that responded to it. But it was pretty revealing in the state of the society in the world today. I asked, are you a product of your choices or a victim of your circumstances? And I was really surprised, and I know that my Facebook bubble, okay, the people that are exposed to Tom Kappenman on Facebook are primarily within the conscious community, the spirituality consciousness community, and I was kind of shocked at the percentages of people that and the way they responded. It came out about I'd say about 70-30, somewhere in there, where that were victims versus products of their own choices, and that one was really shocking to me, especially within my bubble. To get that high of a percentage of victims, and it was startling. I mean, it really showed me at least a small spattering of the my own Tom's little poll, my victim poll out there, and I see that as well. That's a product of the programming. Media's perfect image, and there's so many things that go into that victim mentality, and I think that's one of the big driving forces right now in the outrage that's going on in society, is that there are so many people that have donned the victim mask and are a complete victim of their circumstances and haven't been able to find that key within themselves to turn on sovereignty, to turn on their own personal ability to direct their own lives. And I think I do have a lot of hope right now, and I mentioned that earlier, that I do have hope for our future, that what we're going through right now is a catalyst to get more. I mean, we've talked about these catalysts in the past, where the things that have triggered certain groups of people to look inside. The 911 was a huge one. Got a tremendous amount of people to start looking outside of their own vanities, their own petty grievances and prejudices, and start looking at something bigger than themselves. And that inevitably, when people start searching any kind of thing like that, almost every single conspiracy theory I've looked at has always led in some way, shape, or form into a conscious community or a spiritual aspect of some kind. So I'm heartened in that aspect of what the turmoil that's going on in the world right now and in our society right now, that I think that it's going to ultimately open a lot of eyes to our own divinity, our own sovereignty. And sovereignty is huge in my world. I mean, I know I'm in exactly where I'm at right now because of my choices, not because I was pushed here by others. And I think
I like that. I like that. Yeah, I think it's a great question, because if you're coming from a place of victimization, and we have to have a soft heart for people that are there, because it's that personal, private healing process, and instead of being critical or judging others and saying, well, you're just still the victim, and then, well, that's spiritually arrogant to say to another person who's feeling very real emotions and consequences based on certain circumstances. And there are certain circumstances that do give that victim place to a person. I would use the example of having a loved one murdered, having, some real kind of legitimate traumatic thing happen to you that does require you to overcome that, because there is a real victimization to certain things that we have to, give some leeway for. However, it's when somebody gets stuck there, and who are we to say how long it takes for somebody to get out of that, right? That's not really up to us either. But we have to just have strong boundaries and have unconditional love for these people. Strong boundaries and love. Okay, I love you, but, I'm not going to let this take over my life or pull me into the drama associated with that. But I'm shoulder to cry on, I can listen to you, I can support you, but here are my boundaries for that. That's always very helpful when you're dealing with somebody else who has that situation going on, and sometimes those prayers are needed, and sometimes that support is needed, and it's a beautiful process. And if you're part of that for somebody else, you gotta remember that you are also connected to that somehow. So is it a mirror for you? What's your learning process? Somebody told me once, a spiritual teacher I was working with back in my early 20s, that when you have an emotional trigger to something, it's a mirror for you. When you don't have an emotional trigger to something, it's not a mirror for you. You're easily able to observe it and not get entangled in the emotional aspects of it. And it's just, there's some other reason why it's manifested for you. And even if to just reiterate the fact that it's not a trigger anymore, perhaps you've healed it, or perhaps it's never been an issue. But when you have an emotional reaction to something, then there is something for you to look at that has to do with your own healing process. So what we're really looking at is a healing of the shadow associated with politics. Politics is the collective platform that's bringing it out for people now. And we're looking at people flock to similar thought processes within people, make their groups, go over here because they're more comfortable, dealing with their healing stuff, triggers, no triggers, whatever. I think it's great, because what we're really being asked to do is to grow up and mature as conscious, universal beings that have a whole much bigger purpose here than to just, go to your mall and shop till you're tired and come home and cook dinner and watch the news. I mean, we've been ingrained into a routine that nurtures and sustains a false way of life.
Right.
This is what a lot of the prophets teach. A lot of the well-known prophets teach this kind of ability to be able to observe and pull yourself out of something. It's like learning karate or Tai Chi. It's like there's a spiritual, universal force that we all have to. It has no religious ties, really, because religion is just another way of labeling things or saying, well, I believe in this story, but I can give you a zillion examples of how all the main religions tie in, and they're basically the same story.
Right.
They're basically the same story with just different characters and dress, and you buy into the one that you want to. And who are we to impose our belief systems on anybody? We are not entitled to walk around imposing our belief systems on people. That is a scam.
Right.
That is a way to reinforce and turn your population into a police force, making them work for you or for an entity or for an institution or for a cause, and getting you to go out there and get recruits. I mean, when do we stop needing followers?
Right.
When do we stop needing people to like us? When do we stop needing other people to give us credibility in anything? I've gotten into my artwork. I've been working on my artwork collections for about 4 years now, and I'm just starting to show my work and put it out into the world, and it's been well received. And I feel really good when I make a piece of art because I'm able to go into my own processing and put whatever it is I see as an image, or put on something onto canvas, or make something come to life. And for me, it's kind of the cherry on the top of the ice cream. It's like, oh yeah, great, I've done it, I've gotten here. I can immerse myself into something that I love, and it can create abundance for me, and it can create beauty, and other people react to that beauty, and other people feel that. And so it's a really good feeling, and I think that's self-love.
Yeah.
And I think we all have a really bad relationship with self-love, because self-love has always been seen as selfish. And if you're not putting other people first, then shame on you because you're in your ego and you're being selfish. Well, excuse me, but we're not all one, and we all need to be able to function in our own space, like who we are, respect our bodies, respect our energies, and that's really what we're here to do. And I think we've been kind of hoodwinked out of that with the false setting of our society, with how we've been so geared to be focused on competition, gaining material things, moving in certain directions, shunning people that don't go in that direction, believing certain things. It's like you wake up in this world when you're a child. You come out, you're born, you wake up, you become conscious of your surroundings. You're like, what? This doesn't even make any sense.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense, but you're so ingrained with it in your indoctrination through school. It's just pounded into your head in all that critical developmental stages. Think about all the societies that came before us that did not stick their toddlers, their 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds into school programs and didn't go through all of that. That has helped to cause the disassociation with nature. It has helped to get rid of that connection and responsibility and empathy for nature, therefore allowing corporations and laws and all these political things we don't like to completely disrespect her, not protect her, and just throw her, aside because they want the oil or they want the resources, and screw the toxicity in the environment and the garbage patches in the Pacific Ocean and all these things happening. That is a very, very, very real mirror of our capitalistic, consumeristic culture. And nobody wants to be told, well, it's not that you're running your car too much or you're burning non-LED lights, it's that you're buying products that have a trickle-down effect that destroy the environment. The Earth will never die. We are never going to kill her, but she will definitely shake us off like a bunch of fleas.
Right. I agree 100% with what you just said. So Hillary, like I said a minute ago, I'm very hopeful for our future, and I kind of see all the trauma and drama going on right now as one of those catalysts for the future unfoldment of who we are. What do you see coming in the future? I know you don't necessarily like to prognosticate too much, but what do you see coming in the near future here? And we'll wrap up here shortly. So I just want to get your feel on what's coming.
Well, it depends on where I look, which direction I look. If I look and I see into some of the harder stuff that we talked about in this show, the digital stuff, right. I see a very, very worrying picture. When I look into the environmental stuff and leadership and how they're forming their rules or taking away their regulations, I get worried about that. I'm watching that. When I look at human consciousness and I reflect on that, I see a lot of optimistic hope, because I really believe that as we are kind of going through the hourglass, we're kind of going through that neck of the hourglass, we're squeezing through that point where we can't bring anything else with us. We really got to refine down to who we really are. We're going to have better relationships with ourselves. We're going to have better relationships with other people. I think an antidote to anger is pleasure. I think people who have a lot of anger have a very bad relationship with pleasure. I think we need to revisit what is pleasurable for us, what causes us to create endorphins in our body and change the biochemistry ourselves without depending on the pharmaceutical industry. I see a lot of that unfolding in bigger and more beautiful ways without being so tied into religion or perversion. And I see a sexual healing with humanity. I see anger healing with humanity. I see a better healing, well, actually a healing with the relationship we have with nature.
Right.
Because until we heal the relationship we have with nature, we're not going to care, really. We're not really going to do anything. We're not really going to be motivated to get off our couches, get off our laptops and get out of the house and go stand up for that grove of trees over there that's coming down to build the next mini mansion for the neighborhood. Right. So
right.
I mean, really, that's what my sight into this is all probability. I don't see anything that's set in stone because it's all fluid, and it's like, well, this could manifest or this could manifest. So I think it really is telltale of our ability to be able to choose. Just like you said, Are we a product of our choices or are we victims? I think people are really going to wake up to the fact that their choices matter. And as we redefine who we are, we redefine our society, we redefine what's important, we're going to be redefining certain institutions like marriage or the school systems, the finances, the capitalistic energies. I mean, how do we really reconcile the damage we've done? Well, we have to really turn it all around. Is Trump the person to do that? I don't know. I know he's causing a lot of change. He's stirring things up, but I think he's really the one to do that if the agenda is kind of headed in that direction where he's going. He's got to take the regulations out. He's got to turn over some things. He's got to deliver on his promises. I mean, I haven't ever really seen a president go into office and deliver most of his promises in the first 2 months.
I know. Isn't that something else? It's unheard of in the political sphere.
Why are we commending that? Why aren't we saying, you know what, I may not agree with him, but I can sure give him credit for the fact that he has really pulled through some of his campaign promises, and he's done a hell of a lot better of a job at doing that than anybody else that's been in office ever.
Yes. I know, that's what when I saw that when I got up on the 9th, November 9th, when I woke up and my jaw dropped open when I saw that he'd won the presidency. It was the farthest thing from my mind. I thought, no way are they going to let him in office. And to see what he's done since he's been in office, there's still a lot more swamp to drain, no doubt about it. I mean, it's such a corrupt system right now that it just really needs an overhaul. But what he's done as far as keeping his word has really given me hope for some form of governmental society that works for the people. The way it's supposed to be, the way it's written. A government of the people for the people. I think he's got that ingrained within him. At least he's expressing that, and he's showing that.
And I think we have an opportunity to work with that off the cuff. Thing. I mean, I really like the fact that he runs his own Twitter account. Because he's accessible. And if he's accessible, that means that we can, until he becomes unaccessible or somebody takes it down or takes it over, because most people in that position or most well-known people don't even manage their own social media accounts, so you're not even dealing with the real person. So the fact that the President of the United States has and uses his own Twitter account, to me, shows me that when I hashtag him or send a message at him, there's a better chance that he's going to see it than not. So why don't we really pick and choose the issues that we want to help facilitate and change? I think he would actually listen. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that he would actually listen to the tweets, get the feedback, because he's not an ingrained career politician. Because he's not tied into so many social issues. A lot of people have a problem with his money. Well, let's look at the microcosmic of that. Do you have problems with money in your own life? And if you have problems with money in your own life, you need to go heal all of that, and then you'll have a better relationship with people who do have money or do have more abundance or are perceived as having more wealth. It's an issue of money, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's about stepping back and just really taking responsibility for what your own stuff is and not care about what other people think about it, not be harsh on others who are going through it, be more supportive of yourself and more supportive of other people. And if we heal all these things, then we have a better chance of being able to be more proactive in our interactions. So let's reach out to Trump and say, we want less data invasiveness. We want more privacy. We don't want people spying on our web browsing. We don't want people in our phones and in our TVs and in our microwaves and in our smart homes. We want better, I have to say, Tom, I know we're running out of time, but this is something else that I wanted to bring up. Locally, we had something in the news pop up about these huge telephone poles going into Troy, New York. You can Google it and find these local news stories. And people of Troy woke up one day and they had all these odd, huge telephone poles put up all over the city. Nobody had asked them. Nobody had said anything about this. They were put into historical districts without the proper, vetting to go through the community. And so they made a stink and went to the news, and the news did a small little snippet story on it, and it caught my eye. And I said, why are they, so this is an infrastructure thing. And it turns out that the company that was using it, that was putting up this, it was a privately owned company, and it was one of the number one private communications infrastructure companies in the United States. Okay? The name of it is just not in my head at the moment, but I'll post something about it if anybody's interested, and you can look it up for the Troy story. So the fact that they were putting these infrastructure poles in with nobody knowing about it caught my eye, and I said, well, what are they doing? So this company was coming in to install 5G technology, which has no standard to it, okay? So 5G technology has no standard. So they have this big, huge privatized communication company coming in and putting up all these telephone poles to install God knows what kind of technology into these small towns in upstate New York. And then all of a sudden one day I noticed they had put up these huge towers that connected where all these big old, I don't know what you call them, but you every now and then you run across these big towers that are lying through the countryside. And
right, the big cell towers.
Cell towers, yeah.
Right.
So they had put in all these other ones. Nobody noticed. Nobody said anything. It's not up to the community. We don't know the health benefits of these things or the health effects. And what is 5G technology, really? What are we dealing with, really? What are we being really sold here? And 5G technology actually has the ability to power up all of the actual smart technology that's being used to spy on private citizens. So these are the things that we really need to be more proactive with and more concerned with and more active in our communities over, and really need to be getting out there and telling people and talking about it and saying this isn't so much a conspiracy anymore as it is a fact. These are actual facts that are happening. So I don't know, I'm going off on a tangent because I wanted to get that in because I wanted people to understand, watch your local news, watch what's going on in your own community.
Right.
Turn this whole Big Brother thing around and start watching them and start sharing that and start talking about that. Yeah. I mean, people get paranoid and say, well, I'm going to be on the no-fly list. Well, let me give you some news. That's very hard to do, to get on the no-fly list. And it's not always a bad thing to just be able to talk about the realities of these things. I mean, if you're already being listened to some way or your data's being collected, I mean, it's like, be a Robin Hood.
Right.
Be somebody who's really going up against the machine and saying no.
Well, you can be much more effective in a local level than you're going to be in a national level, right? As guys down here on the streets, we can shake our fists at the big brother, the government, and all that stuff, but we're not paying attention to the telephone poles, like you said, that are going in down our street. There's things we can do at a local level that can be much more effective. And there's town halls all over the place. You can go in and sit down at your city council meetings. You can be proactive in your own neighborhoods. There's so much we can do locally and people are jumping up and down over the national thing, what they're seeing on the TV news, you know. So, yeah, I agree with you 100%. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's not just news. It's not just TV. See, a lot of people don't watch TV anymore. The news headlines get to us in every other way as well. You don't have to watch TV anymore.
Right,
All you
right.
do is turn your cell phone on or your laptop. We're all exposed to it in a variety of ways, and it's all in what you do with information, right?
Yep.
I mean, you get 4% of information on the internet. Well, what do you do with that? Well, you create theories and you create opinions and belief systems based on 4% of information. Doesn't that automatically discredit your belief system? Because you don't have all the information, right?
Right.
And really, I mean, we just have to put it in perspective. I don't like to leave people feeling slimed after a conversation like this. I don't want people to
I feel dirty.
Listening to this 2-hour show and say, "Oh my God, I'm so depressed now. It's so awful. Hillary just talks about all this stuff, and I can't deal with it." Well, let me give you some hope here, guys. It really comes down to igniting and owning and strengthening your superpowers. And I really see that the connection is a macrocosm mirror of the microcosm potential between people. And if we can look at the technology that we have popping up all over the planet, and we can look at the realities of that, we can kind of see a microcosm of ability between one person and another person. And a spiritual belief that blocks that is that other. Well, yes, there is. In this human experience, there is an other. There is another person sitting next to you. There is people sitting around your dinner table. You know, these are other people. These are not you. This is not a projection of you. This is a very real manifestation of intuitive intelligence sitting in front of you. Have a conversation. Inspire each other. Get close to each other. Create pleasure in your conversation. Create pleasure in your food, in your life, in your bodies, and just really start to move that energy through things. And you'll see an opening start to happen where you'll shed this, you know, perception or illusion of what you thought you were based on a constructed reality, matrix, whatever you want to call it, that wasn't your creation.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Wow. Well, Hillary, you know, we touched on a lot of stuff tonight. You know, I think it's needed to be. I've needed to talk to somebody about it for sure myself, and I'm really grateful that you came on and had this conversation with us, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners out there are going to be grateful for it too. It brought some very good food for thought for those out there listening. And I'm sure Hillary and I are both eager to hear any feedback from you guys out there listening to the show. I know you can reach Hillary via her website. That's HillaryRaimo.com. And you will find a link in the info section down below wherever you are listening to this at. There will be a link to Hillary's website and a link to the 100thmonkeyradio.com where my contact information also is, and we would love to hear from you guys and spark up some more conversations. So, man. So, Hillary, what do you got coming up this summer? What are you doing? You're pretty active, right?
Well, yeah, I have a lot of stuff going on. I have a conference coming up here in upstate New York. I will be presenting along with several other presenters. There's a couple who will be talking about reconnecting trust bonds. There's a woman who's an Iranian woman who's coming to share her healing story, very politically relevant right now. And then we have an award-winning shamanic sound healer who will be doing a 2-hour sound concert at the end of the evening. So it's going to be a great day, great opportunity. And I have some art shows coming up, some different work will be displayed, and all of that can be found on my website. So everything that I have going on can be. If you want to work with me or have a session with me, or, you know, and I'm going to put this out there, if something resonated with you in this station, with Tom and I, and you feel like you need to go deeper for yourself, please have a session with me. Because what I do is I do one-on-ones on the phone, Skype is not so dependable anymore, but your phone, And I will be more than happy to go into some of these things that these circumstances are triggering for you. That's my offering of help. And it's on the table, and if you'd like to take advantage of it, you can go to my website and book a session, because people really need to talk about this, Tom. Nobody's talking about this in the media. Nobody's talking about this in the alternative media, and shame on you guys.
Right.
Because this is not a time for us to break down into little cliques and go off and be, high schoolers. We should be pulling together, working together, stop pointing fingers at each other, stop playing this ridiculous thing that we all do in this alternative media stuff, and start really, coming together, being more proactive, talking about these things, and stop being so, just stuck. I feel like a lot of the alternative media people are stuck.
Yeah.
And they have to move through some of that stuckness to be able to get into some of the more important topics that people really need to talk about. Because you won't hear me talk about this on CNN.
Right.
You won't hear me talk about this on anything else. Because you'll never let anybody like me come on those shows and talk about this stuff. That's the truth.
Right.
All right. So I've been talking about this stuff for over 10 years. And I like talking about it because it still feels important. It still feels like it's valuable information for people to understand. And as long as that happens, I'll talk about it.
Hear, hear.
So yeah, I'm here.
All
Tom's
right.
here too. Reach out to us, talk to us, put some feedback in, share the podcast, share the show. Really, guys, you're not paying to listen to this. This isn't a product. We're not selling anything. We're having a conversation about realities, and I'm sure there's some drop of nugget gold in here for you guys, and I just appreciate you listening and taking the time to hear it from beginning to end so that you can really comprehend the information that we're discussing.
Fantastic. Well, Hillary, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon. I know that.
Thanks, Tom. It's been a pleasure.
All right.
Great.
All right, guys out there listening, thank you so much for joining us. Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. Namaste, my friends. Much love, and we will see you next time.